Educators are embracing flipped learning in elementary and secondary schools across all disciplines, shifting direct instruction from the group learning space to the individual learning space. The flipped classroom is very different from what most parents have experienced in school, so they may not understand the purpose, reasoning, or need behind the changes required to implement flipped learning. That's why it's critical to inform parents in advance of the changes and then help them understand how to appropriately support student success in the flipped model. Our guest speakers today are Katie Lanier and Kirch, who have both been flipping their classes now for 3 years. Katie, let's start with you, and if you could please introduce yourself to our audience, that'd be great.
Hi, I'm Katie Lanier. I teach physics in a class called Scientific Research and Design, which is a science elective at Allen High School in Texas, and this is my 3rd year of teaching in a flipped classroom.
Wonderful. Welcome, Katie. And Crystal, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kirch. I teach out at Sugarstrom High School in Southern California, and I teach math. I teach both low-level math and high-level math. And just like Katie, this is my 3rd year doing a flipped learning approach in my classroom, and I'm very excited to share again with you guys today.
Wonderful. So welcome, Katie and Crystal. The mic is all yours.
Perfect. Well, like I just said, this is my 3rd year using the flipped learning approach, and so I taught for 4 years traditionally, and I finally came to a point where I really wanted something different. I wanted something to change. I felt like I needed to make better use of the actual face-to-face time I had with my students. I have 54-minute periods, and I always felt like I was just rushing bell to bell to get through all of this content and didn't really get to necessarily engage with all of my students and really support them, especially in a class where I had high students and low students, just being able to really reach them where they needed to be reached. And so I stumbled across the flipped classroom model online just over 3 years ago and really just fell in love with it and realized that it was a solution to a lot of the issues that I was facing. And one of my big goals is that class time is more effective and that it's more engaging for students and they're able to collaborate and they're able to work on higher order thinking activities. And that's been a huge shift for me going from the traditional environment to the flipped learning environment. It's continued to grow over the last 3 years. I feel like every year I've continued to grow and mold and shape my classroom. It definitely started off really focused on the video, and that's something when I talk with people about the flipped classroom, it's very easy to think that a flipped classroom is all about videos, but now it's so much more. It's really about making better use of that face-to-face time and just using those videos or whatever technology or whatever learning object that you use as an instructional tool, and so class time can be transformed. And what I have written here, it makes it sound like it's perfect and it's wonderful, and it's definitely not always perfect, but it's definitely a more engaging, more effective, more enjoyable environment than how I pictured my classroom when I was teaching traditionally. A couple of my great successes over the last 3 years is I really feel like flipped learning helps my students get a deeper conceptual understanding, especially in math, really understanding the why behind things. I feel like oftentimes our math students are just told this is how you do it, and so memorize how to do it, and they don't understand the beauty and the connections behind the math. So we've really had time to get into that. I also feel like my students are able to communicate more effectively verbally and orally. I have them, creating their own work and posting it on their blogs and writing about math and just a lot of things that I didn't necessarily have the time for in a traditional classroom, and now my class time is just opened up and, like I've mentioned before, just effective, engaging, and enjoyable. It's been a great journey full of ups and downs, but definitely a great step in the right direction as I've been continuing to transform my classroom.
Yeah, hi. For me, the flipped classroom has really evolved over the last 3 years, and the story is somewhat similar to Crystal's. But I started out needing class time to work physics problems with kids because the state of Texas decided that every kid needed physics, which is a real challenge for kids that are still struggling with algebra. And so one of the chemistry teachers at our high school was teaching our AP class with the flip model, and I watched her for a while and thought, well, you know, this will work for physics. There's no reason why it can't. And so I did the thing that most people do. I started transferring my lectures to a video and then sending that home for kids to work on at home, just copy stuff down. And when we got to class, we had more time for lab. I was no longer stuffing data down their throats and sending them home to finish up a lab that they couldn't do, or handing them a bunch of word problems that I know they loved dearly and still couldn't do. And so it just really shifted the whole atmosphere of the classroom to something that was more enjoyable, less frustrating and stressful. Parents didn't have to do physics homework with their kids, which is often a stretch. And one of the really great benefits is it's really differentiated. My struggling kids get the help they need. The kids that are zipping through this because they were born knowing it can keep zipping and get into more interesting stuff. And over the last few years, it's really evolved into something that's student-centered. We've been able to try inquiry to start a unit. My senior class is completely problem-based learning. I quit giving paper tests sometime last year in that class. And so it's really a joy to come in and do some physics.
Over the last 3 years, I think we can both agree there's been a lot of lessons that we have learned. And I think one of the biggest lessons is that communication and transition and training cannot be underemphasized. When we first started, this was brand new to us, but it was also brand new to our students. It was brand new to our parents. It was brand new to our administration. It was brand new to everyone. And a lot of people right off the bat just kind of say, well, what we've been doing for the last 100 years has worked. Why are you changing anything? And so we've learned that communication is key. Transitioning is a process, and some students and parents, once you communicate with them, they're going to be on board. Other parents and students are going to take quite a while, and other students and parents are going to be a struggle as you continue to just kind of try to emphasize why you have a different model. And so patience is key for sure, and we've learned a lot of lessons that we'll share with you throughout the course of this webinar. But we can't underemphasize the fact that, jumping into this, it's going to be a struggle, and you need to take that time to transition. You need to have patience as people are trying to adjust to the change, and you need to explicitly train your students on what you expect. They don't know how to learn from a video. They don't know what to do with class time a lot of times when they're used to coming into class and sitting there in their chair and taking notes. How are they supposed to effectively use their class time? All of those things are important, and we've definitely learned them over the last 3 years.
Yeah, and one of the really surprising things, since putting flipped learning into a classroom is a lot of work on the teacher's part, was people, parents and students both, saying, go back to teaching. And last year we even had a group in one of the chemistry classes pull up a whole petition on we want our teachers to go back to teaching. And we all knew it was better this way, but the kids didn't really know what was expected and how to work it. So you really do have to do the training, and you have to convince the parents and the students that you are still teaching, even though it looks really different than what they're used to. So they're not getting the homework sent home, so the parents aren't seeing the same thing, but they're still working at home if you assign homework. And there's so much going on in class. The kids, since you're not talking up in front of the classroom, the kids call it busy work, which I was shocked at, until they really understand, no, it's not busy work, it's work that we're doing to get better and better at the subject. And it is more work than you're used to. And we did steal your nap time, I'm sorry. And then over the last 3 years, we started off and it was, oh, this is a flipped classroom. But now, because of the press and because there's so many ways to do it, I quit really emphasizing that label, because there's so many different ways to flip a classroom, and you kind of have to make it work for what you're doing. that everybody has their own little style and tweak to it. So it's just how my classroom is now.
Yeah, I think those are some really good points. I would agree that I've gone through that as well, where just with what people have heard, every classroom is different. And so communicating exactly what you do in your classroom, that it's maybe different than what the mainstream media shares about a flipped classroom is really important. And like I mentioned a couple minutes ago, we're talking about, engaging parents today, but it's not just engaging parents and informing parents. It's also engaging and informing your students, your administration, and other teachers on your campus, because having that support of everyone really helps a flipped learning environment to succeed, when everyone understands what's going on and you're getting as many people on board as possible.
Yeah, so with parents, you've got to be really straightforward and tell them exactly what your classroom looks like, because they don't know, and often, like Crystal said, it's going to be different than what you're really doing. And it's really important. Your administrators are going to need to know what you're doing, because they're the ones the parents are going to call to get things fixed. And so you need them to understand why you're doing it, what you're doing, and help them help you deal with the parent issues. And hopefully other teachers will be excited about it, but sometimes they're not so much excited about it, so keep a positive light on talking with them.
Definitely. So what we're going to look at for the rest of this webinar is just some key aspects of communication. So we're going to talk about why we need to communicate, what exactly we should communicate, when to communicate, and then how, some different methods, models, modes to communicate. And so this is our goal for the rest of our time with you today. So first off is why communicate? Well, we want to get our parents on our side as early as possible. Like Katie has been mentioning, it's going to be different from what they're used to, and they might think that you're not teaching anymore. So what they need to understand is that, you're still teaching their kid, and in fact, you're probably working harder than you used to, and you're working smarter than you used to, because you're making more effective use of the time that you have with their students. So it's going to be different, and when things are different, people sometimes just kind of put a wall up. But if this works in your school, invite them into your classroom. Let them see what's going on. You want them on your side, because if students go home and complain to their parents about what's going on, and parents have no idea what's going on, then it's hard for the parents to truly understand just from a student's perspective. But if you are communicating with them, you can get them on your side, and you can help the parents bring the kid along as well.
Now, a lot of this is going to sound a lot like what you do for a traditional classroom. And so there's not a whole lot of new things. It just becomes very, very important, because the technique could be new and they don't understand it. So you really want to be the first one to tell a parent what a flipped classroom looks like, in particular what yours is, and make sure that they understand that the kids aren't teaching themselves, that you're doing the teaching because you're interacting with them and helping them out. And then help them deal with the technology issues. Be sure that they have access at home, and provide DVDs or little thumb drives, or places and times at school where the kids can get to the technology, and work through that. That's a big work through at the beginning of starting up any flipped class.
Yeah, and another key reason is you want to communicate because you do want to get their feedback. You want to know what they're struggling with. I can't tell you how many students who I've had who struggle the first couple weeks, and you keep talking with them and everything, and then finally they come in and you're able to talk with them one-on-one, and you figure out what the issues are and why they're struggling and how to fix them and how to support them. So taking that initiative in communicating, trying to talk with the parents and the students and really understand what's going on in their mind, what specifically they might be struggling with, is really, really key in helping them transition smoothly into the whole year.
All right, so now we get to what it is you need to be communicating. And one of the big first things is to tell the kids and their parents why you're making this change. You want the parents to know that you're doing this so that you can be more helpful to their students, so their students more engaged in learning, they have more opportunities to apply what they're learning. Talk about some of the successes that you know about, and then as the year goes on, you can inform them of the successes that are happening in your class as you get to know the kids. And the kids will pass that on to the parents too. They're very happy when they get to learn something that they thought was too hard to learn. And then let them know that you're going to be more supportive. You're right there when the kid needs help, exactly helping them with what they need. And that's really great for the parents to hear. And like Crystal said before, invite the parents in to see it, because then they'll really believe it's working if they're real doubters and they're willing to come in. And then the other thing is, what is it that you can expect to be different? You are changing things, and so now the parents need to know what it is you want them to do. And so if you're sending a video home for homework, that's not something usual. The parents are used to problems out of a book or writing out papers or essays. And so watch a video and take notes might be completely different to them, and they may not believe the kid at first, which is one of the reasons I sent home notes, because I thought, yeah, look this up on YouTube and write notes on it. Didn't sound like homework to me. And so explain what you want them to get out of the video, that it doesn't look like what they're used to, but it's going to be basic information and the things that they need to know to get through class the next day and apply it. And then I don't expect mastery from a lecture in class. I expect kids to hopefully stay awake, take some notes, and move on. And so I don't expect mastery from the video. I'm expecting more of an exposure and the idea that they can come in with work to work with. So this is very much parallel to the idea of what you'd expect from a lecture. And then there's a lot, oh, sorry.
That's okay. Another important thing is tech access, and Katie mentioned this a couple minutes ago. You do need to consider if students do or do not have tech access at home. So one thing that I do is at the very beginning of the year, I do send home a survey, and they have to fill out exactly what sort of access they have. I think on the next slide there's a picture of the survey that that I send out, and then I just ask them, do you have a computer with consistent internet access, a computer with inconsistent internet, you have a computer but no internet, and that's when a flash drive would be a great solution, or they don't have a computer at home, but maybe they do have consistent access at a neighbor or a family member's house, and just finding out exactly where they're at. And that way, from the very beginning, a student doesn't feel like they're not going to be able to be successful in this class because they don't have a computer. And the first day, I always do have a couple students who, this survey goes home and it takes a couple days to get back. And the first couple days, these kids are kind of freaking out because they're like, well, I don't have a computer. How am I going to do this? And then as soon as I get the survey back and I find out who they are and I meet with them and I kind of talk about solutions, then they feel so much more comfortable. So communicating that, tech access is not going to be something that's going to be a barrier is really important. And then next, what is the flipped classroom going to look like? And this is not a question that the media can answer for you. You need to communicate with parents exactly what your flipped classroom is going to look like. We have some pictures from our classroom on the next slide. And you know what? You can tell parents exactly what's going on. There's some from my class where, students are collaborating. They're working on whiteboards, working on the boards, having discussions. I'm there to support and model. There's some pictures from Katie's class doing some awesome physics labs. And it's engaging, it's project-based, it's exciting. And it's not just students sitting in rows listening to a teacher. And so actually showing them what it looks like is important in your communication.
And then what we have is what can you expect to be the same? And they're still getting the lessons, and that's important. And they're going to get all the material they need to be successful, but they get the extra class time that they would love to have that they'd have to come to tutoring for to get help in other situations. And they have like everything they need to succeed. I guess I don't have a better way to say that, but that's pretty much it. That's the same as you got before.
And one other thing on that is I feel like I'm still available for my students for tutoring, but not as many of them need to take advantage of it outside of school anymore because they get that greater help during class time. So it's a lot more effective and efficient for teacher and student because we're able to provide support for them during the school day rather than them having to come before or after school for extra tutoring.
Yeah, we find the same thing. Even makeups can be done during class often, that we have the class time to help kids keep up with everything. So that's very nice. So here's how my class looks. The top one is traditional, where they come in, you do a warm-up, you talk to them for a half an hour, 45 minutes about what they need to work with the rest of the class period. They'd have a little bit of practice, working problems or using equipment. We'd set them loose on some labs. They'd grab their data, and ideally there's that thing called a wrap-up. I'm not sure I ever got to that because usually it was work till the bell, clean everything up, and let them run home with their pile of homework. But then when we flipped the lesson and I sent home what used to be a 30-minute lecture at least is now 10 minutes or less of video, which is really amazing to me the first time I did that. And then we have more time to really work with the kids and get them ready to use that information. And I actually do get to wrap up now, so it's very nice.
And I don't have 90-minute classes. I have 54-minute classes. So mine looks similar, but also just a little bit different on the timeline. So in a traditional, you have the warm-up, 35 to 40 minutes is the lesson. Hopefully you get to the 5 to 10 minutes of guided practice in a math class where you can work with the students with them trying it on their own. Sometimes it would just, go all the way to the bell so you wouldn't get that. And then all of a sudden you'd send students to practice problems independently at home and hope that they understood it. Now with the flipped, again, before class they have some sort of video tutorial or other way to prepare for class. And at the beginning of class we can spend some time in a discussion. That's what I call a WSQ Chat, where they're able to discuss their questions, and maybe I'll pose some higher order thinking questions to them. And the bulk of class is focused on them collaborating with their group, getting individual or small group support, getting that guided practice, doing those higher order creation activities. And that's what class time is for now, rather than sitting there listening to me.
It's so much better that way.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. I think that's why we've been doing this for the last 3 years. The next couple of slides, we have just a couple quotes from our students, and these are ones that just stood out to us as this is why we're doing this. One of my 11th grade students last year said, "The minute I step into the classroom, I feel this happy aura. A flipped classroom isn't your typical watch the teacher falling asleep while taking notes classroom. It's much more active and student-friendly. Students are given the liberty to discuss and interact with their peers' problems with last night's homework, or perhaps a problem they might have with a certain concept." That's exactly one of the biggest reasons why I'm doing this. And even one of my 9th grade students, CP level student, says it's more effective than a non-flipped classroom because you stay on task instead of dozing off when the teacher is talking for 40 minutes in front of a classroom full of kids. So my honor students get it, my CP kids get it. It's definitely worth it.
Yeah, but we did steal their nap time. But even so, I mean, this was one of the first surveys that I did, and these are the responses I got back from my kids. And I will say it was a split between who liked it and who didn't, but it was still about 70% liked it the first semester, which made me feel really good. And I wasn't good at it yet, so it was a good to get the feedback. I like the one that says, "I wish all classes were like this." Mm-hmm. And these were kids that wouldn't have usually liked physics, and they would have struggled, and they would have been in tutoring if they had the time, which is so hard for kids, especially at the high school level, to make time to get in.
So we've talked about the why and the what. So now we have 3 important things of when to communicate. I think obviously the first one is beginning of the year, you need to communicate. And one thing that Katie and I realized as we were talking over the last couple months is that the newer flipped learning is to your school, the more you need to communicate. If you're the first teacher at your school doing a flipped classroom model, you're going to feel like you need to over-communicate and really, really help transition parents and students. Whereas, you know, now that this is in my third year, I am the only teacher at my site flipping, but it's just kind of known now. And, you know, Katie, you can tell your story as well, that you're not the only teacher. In fact, I think you are teaching other teachers at your school. Is that right?
Yeah, it's spread from the one AP chemistry teacher to me and my teaching partner, and then entire teams now. So our whole physics team is flipping, and then the whole chemistry team has flipped. And we even have junior high classes that have flipped their classrooms. So we're getting kids that have been in flipped classrooms for a year or two, which is really nice. And all of our administrators are familiar with it. So that kind of communication is done. But even so, my flipped classroom is different than the one before them, and you have to be mindful of, if the person before you wasn't quite doing it right, you may have to do some damage repair.
Mm-hmm.
And let people know that you can do this and you can do it well, and here's why you're going to have a great year this year.
I've definitely had that same experience. I've had students come in totally upset about, you know, having to be in a flipped classroom, and, you know, after a month or so they realized, they said, this is more effective the way, you know, when it's done right. And I think that is a good thing to communicate. So I do have some samples. On the next slide, I put together like a parent's packet almost, and it's pretty extensive, kind of overwhelming, but there's some important things on there of just kind of what I send home. So I send home, you know, an FAQ, questions that come up often, and I have some parts on there of, you know, why am I flipping? And so they have that in writing. And they have that brought home the first day of school, and then I can continually just reemphasize that and go back to that. And I think that's a great tool for that.
Okay, so when you've been communicating at the beginning of the year, you still do the same things you did in a traditional classroom throughout the year. You want to send home the newsletters if you do it regularly. Keep doing that and let them know about the changes and what's going to happen next. And then the event-focused stuff like retakes and makeups. For a while, you may need to remind them about video lessons, and then at the middle of the year, you might remind them again. Struggling students will still need to get emails and phone calls, and then when students are doing really well, it's great to say, hey, this kid really adapted to what we're doing and is getting a lot out of it, and I appreciate their hard work.
And something I just started this year is I actually did start sending home a weekly email to parents, just updating them on the class, and especially at the beginning of the year, just continual reminders every week about what's expected from the students, and just opening those lines of communication. And I'm not going to say I had a ton of parents replying to those emails, but parents would mention like, oh yeah, I get your emails every week, and I appreciate you taking the time to just kind of let us know what's going on. So that's been a nice success for me this year. That doesn't take more than 5 minutes out of my week, and just kind of keeps those lines open and lets the parents know that you're not just off doing this. You want them to be your partner in helping their students succeed. And besides all that informal communication, we found it to be effective no matter what year of flipping you are, to have a formal follow-up in the middle of the year and at the end of the year. And I've always done this via just a Google form survey that I send out. So this is the sample of my parent survey, and I asked them some questions where they could just kind of pick, never, rarely, sometimes, frequently, always. And then I gave them some chance for just some open-ended responses. And this just gives parents the knowledge of, your feedback matters, and then also lets this is maybe what worked this year, maybe this is what I need to tweak. We're both in year 3, but we are far from perfect, and we're continually learning new things and continually tweaking things to try to make the learning environment the best that it can be for our students. So this is one of the results. So the nice thing about doing a survey via Google Forms is they give you these little summary forms or summary graphs. And one of the questions I ask is, what effect do you believe the flipped classroom has had on your child's achievement in math this year? I ask them a lot of different questions about their achievement, their attitude, their just everything. And this one just really stood out to me because 75% of my parents said, I've seen a positive effect. And that's huge.
We already got that one, didn't we?
I think so, yeah. Reflect on your teaching, make adjustments. That's the whole purpose of it. You send the survey out just to send it out, not going to be worth your time, but you send it out to actually really get some feedback from it and make some changes. That's going to be effective and really going to help your practice grow.
And I think one of the things I'll tag onto this, at least with my high schoolers, and this is probably true for all of the kids, if you respect them and respect their answers and let them know you're going to take this seriously, they will be brutally honest with you and let you know exactly where they are with this whole process and where you can help them succeed. And so off from done with when, and now we get to how, and this one's kind of a tricky thing. There's lots of modes of communication, and every school's got their own thing. I send home a video at the beginning of the year. Some folks are using Edmodo. I have Remind 101 that I use that just blasts out little email reminders, and then my school's we're starting to move to a learning management system that gives us all sorts of options for communicating, and we have the blast emails, and then the old style, pick up the phone and call a parent, or talk with them on parent night. Those are all great ways to communicate.
One thing that we have found to be really effective is making sure that it's personal. You're not just sending home something that another teacher has created. You are sending or communicating with them specifically about what's going on in your class and what students are going to be expected to do in your class, not just a random flipped classroom that you read about online. So I send home a video as well, and then those emails that I talked about as well. And when we're talking about the style of communication being personally is really making that personal connection with parents, because if you are just kind of standoffish and just kind of say, well, I told you about it in the parent letter, or I told you about it in the video, that might not come across so well. And so even though, yes, they're supposed to read the letter and yes, they're supposed to read the video, when they have questions, just answering them with an open mind and just really trying to understand their point of view and making that personal connection with the parents, that's going to go really far in making an effective transition to the flipped classroom.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah, and you don't want to be jargony. These are parents, you're trying to reach them, and you want them on your side. And so that would be what I would add that on to a style issue, is be straightforward. If you can win the parents over, you can win the students over, you've got most of the battle there. And so part of that is keeping the tone of your communications positive light. Don't go into what I'm going to do when your kid doesn't watch the video and isn't prepared for class. That's just not doing your homework. It hasn't changed. And just point out that everybody's going to succeed and I'm going to help them, and make sure you're talking about how you're still teaching in this piece, because you'll need to refer back to how you're still teaching. Don't talk about not doing homework, and just the positive presupposition that everybody's going to do their job will make a big difference. And so this was one of the parents that I had a special needs kid that really probably shouldn't have been in physics, but wanted it to be in the class desperately. And this is what I got from them in a note, which made a big difference at the end of the year after I struggled through getting this implemented. So I keep this one around.
And this is a note from one of my parents. You're doing a wonderful job with the students and how much her daughter has benefited. Another thing just to remind yourself of when you have struggling relationships with different students and parents is that there are parents that do come around and understand the differences and understand the purpose behind it and really do see that success. And a lot of my other parents really like actually being able to learn along with their kids. I have a parent, I don't have her daughter this year, but she came up to my class during open house a month or so ago to say that she misses watching my videos this year with her daughter. She misses hearing my voice in her house, and being able to see what her daughter is learning. And I think that is really neat in involving parents in their child's education, and also helping parents who maybe don't have a college or even high school education, being able to learn a little bit with their kids.
Yeah, I had one parent with a similar deal. She sent me a note asking me when the next physics lesson was coming home, because she'd already watched and rewatched the others. And I thought, wow, okay, that was interesting. I never thought that the parents would be that involved in it.
So I think one of the biggest questions that we want you guys to be able to take away from today is making parents your partner. When we get our parents on board, that is one of the steps to success in getting our students on board. And so through everything that we have talked about, the why, the what, the when, the how are we going to be making our parents our partner and effectively engage them, inform them about what is going on? And hopefully the strategies that we have suggested for you today have been helpful, and some things that you can take away and implement in your classroom even now at the end of the year, just trying to finish off the year with good communication, and then as you plan for next school year as well.
Yeah, and this last little bit of the school year is a great time to experiment with a few things, because for the most part we're done with a lot of the big learning pieces and the content. And while it is hectic, it's a nice time to try some things so you can tweak them over the summer. But think about, what have you done in the past that works? Because it's still going to apply. Nothing has really changed as far as how you need to get those parents on board and how you need to talk to them, except it's just more frequent and you have to deal with the idea of change. And then think about specifically what you're changing and how you're going to explain that to the parents and to the students to get them on board and have them be your partners.
Wonderful. Katie and Crystal, awesome information as usual. Thank you so much. And it just makes me sit here and wish I had flipped learning back when I was going to school. I'd like to thank the Flipped Learning Network for partnering with SchoolWires to promote this event. And so while Katie and Crystal catch their breath and grab a drink of water, I'd like to invite Kristen Daniels to say a few words.
Great. Thank you so much. Hi, you guys. My name is Kristen Daniels, and I am a board member of the Flipped Learning Network. And first of all, I want to thank SchoolWires for hosting this webinar. And Katie and Crystal, what a wonderful job. It was really fun. I've heard you guys present before, but it's always so great to hear your good perspective. And I did write something down, and hopefully you guys can maybe address it in the Q&A, but in the end, Katie, you talked about the end of the year being a great time to experiment, and hopefully maybe you could talk about taking risks and trying new things again, because I think that's a great point. So thank you guys so much for your expertise. Do the next slide, please.
All right.
I just want to share a few things before the Q&A. Want to make sure that you guys are aware of the Flipped Learning Network is a great resource for many things. We also have a Ning network, which is our free online community of practice, and the growth of this network has been quite phenomenal over the last 3 years. I don't know when Crystal and Katie joined, but I've seen it go from just 2,500 members. So right now it's over 19,000, and it is free to sign up and connect with other educators across the country who are flipping their classrooms. So that's a great resource. Want to remind you also about the resources that are on the Flipped Learning Network site. We have webinars on a monthly basis. We also have a lot of research that is helpful in perhaps talking to your administrators about the benefits of flipped learning. There are case studies there as well. The Flipped Learning Network offers workshops. There's a workshop coming up this Saturday in Chicago. And then one thing I also want to mention is a course that was created by flipped learning teachers across the country called the Foundations of Flipped Learning. And if you could flip to the next slide, Katie. There's one more image there. This is a great course. It was a partnership between the Flip Learning Network and Pearson, and it is quite thorough. And if you're interested in that, you can find information on the fliplearning.org site. We have our major annual conference coming up in June. That is FlipCon 14, and this year it's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, well, near Pittsburgh in Mars, at Mars Area High School. Registration is still available, and if you are unable to make it face-to-face, there's also a virtual option as well. So it's, as always, it's full of great discussion and sessions, so hopefully we will see you there. So thank you. I will turn it back over. You guys did a great job. Thank you, Katie and Crystal, and back to School Wires.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. Oh, my goodness, Katie and Crystal, we have a bunch of questions coming in, so let's see what we can get through here. The first question is from Mary. Could you share where you host your videos and how do you create them? What kind of software do you use?
I can start off with that, and then Katie, you can jump in with other things. I create my videos using Camtasia as a screen recording software, and then I also use a couple apps on the iPad if I want to make iPad ones. I use Show Me as my main one, but I've also used Explain Everything. Show Me is a free one. Explain Everything, I think, is about $2.99. So depending on how quick I'm making the video, I either use Camtasia, which is by TechSmith, or those two apps on the iPad. I host my videos on a website called sophia.org, and they allow me to upload videos directly to their server, so I don't need to worry about anything like YouTube being blocked at school. And it allows me to embed Google Forms and images and PDFs and everything right along with the video. So that's what I've found to be the best model for me.
Yeah, and I use Camtasia, and I've also used Snagit to do quick screencasts, and those are both the TechSmiths. And we have interactive whiteboards at my school, so I use a smart recorder, and I don't know if there are other boards, and they'll probably call it something else, but I like recording with that because it'll do voice, and I like to write big to solve the problems, and so that helps out a lot. And my videos are all on Vimeo.com, and there's a few on YouTube, but YouTube is blocked at the school, so that's why I went with Vimeo.
Great. And I'm making a list of all of these so that we can put together a list and send that out to everyone. So don't worry if you haven't written them all down. We'll make sure and compile a list for you. Okay. Next question. This is for Crystal. Can you explain more about your WSQ charts and the signatures?
The WIS charts and what else?
And the signatures.
And the signatures. Okay. When I organize my content, I have what's called WIS charts. It's WSQ. So basically it stands for Watch, Summarize, Questions. So I have the students watch the video, and I've learned that if I just tell them to watch the video, a lot of them don't necessarily learn anything from it because they just kind of watch it casually. So I make them do some sort of summary after that, and then they actually have to write a question down that relates to the content, whether they have a question or if they don't have a question, they have to come up with a good discussion question for the class. So that's kind of what they do when they're at home, and so I have just kind of like an assignment chart, I guess, that organizes that for them. I have samples of it on my blog if you are interested in looking at some samples of that. And depending on the class, that's kind of where they get their stuff signed off as they continue through it, to kind of hold them accountable, to make sure that they're getting the lessons, doing the activities, and all of that sort of stuff. Depending on the class and the level, if it's honors or CP, will depend on kind of how I do the signatures. But yeah, I have this answer could go on for quite a while, so I'm going to kind of just leave it at that nice little summary for right now.
Great, thank you. And we have a question from Michael. Do you feel like rumors among parents has dropped now that you've been doing it for a few years? And Katie, you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, I think because this is the third year of flipping the classroom and the school district I'm in, there's a number of different levels and courses that are flipped. The parents are used to it now, or more used to it, and so there's less of a issue of convincing them it's a good idea.
And I would agree with that. As time goes on, it's just more, they've heard from other parents in previous years, and even if those parents didn't like it from the very beginning, by the end of the year they saw the success of it, and their students saw the success, so they're able to pass that on to the future parents, and that's been nice.
And I'll add on real quick. You know, it's for me when I have physics that I'm sending home to kids, and it's on an Algebra 2 level, it's not often that kids have two parents at home that are, at least one of them can help them with physics or Algebra 2 comfortably. And so you could convince them pretty easily by saying, I'm taking this out of your hands. You don't have to do physics homework with your kid. But if you would help them make sure they get notes from this video, that would be great. And I'll take care of the physics and the Algebra 2 when they get to class. So make it something that helps the parents out.
That's great answers. And Heather had a question that I think is very similar to that one. We'll just see if you wanted to add anything more. She asks, do you have any advice for going into the second year of flipping where you already know you have parents who have a negative attitude toward the flipped class? For example, are there any things that you would do differently in your communications, or would you still follow the same rule of thumb that you have set out today?
I was just thinking, you know, after you've done it for a year, you do have stories of success that you can share that you probably didn't, well, you obviously didn't have it your first year. And so your first year, you're just kind of jumping in and, you know, you're doing this. But your second year, even though there may be, you know, some negativity from that first year, you do have stories of success that you can share and you can emphasize those. And I think that's when the personal communication just comes in. If you do have a couple parents who really just come in with a negative attitude towards it because of what they've heard or what their friends have said, really just jumping in personally, meeting with them, you know, chatting over the phone and connecting with them, trying to get them on board as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I'd say find out what it is that they know. You know, what is it that's making them have this negative feeling towards it? Maybe it doesn't apply to your classroom, and you can just dismiss it right there and say, well, you know, that may be the way so-and-so did it, or I tried that last year and I know it didn't work, so I'm not doing that anymore. So it may be an easy answer. And if it's a real problem that you didn't know about, then you can figure out a way, you know, wow, I didn't realize that was going on. I really need to think about that and come up with a way to make it work for your kid. And so there's two real reasons to really talk to the parent and find out what the root of the cause is.
Great point.
Yeah, those are great points, Katie. Yeah.
Jennifer has a question. Do you keep a video archive for parents and students to access throughout the year?
I'll start off. I do. I post everything on a Blogspot is where I embed everything. So my website is kirchmathanalysis.blogspot.com, and it's organized by units, and the Sophia tutorials that I use are embedded on there. So they have access to everything from the entire year at any point. And at this point, they have access to things where, you know, that they're not going to get to in 2 months, and they have access to things that they did 2 months ago. And obviously that's not something I had the first year that I flipped, but now that I've been through it, I have most of the stuff up and ready, and that's very helpful.
Yeah, it's the same here, although the assignments for future assignments, I may go in and update them, so they may change, but they're still up. Past assignments and past videos are all still there, so the kids that are behind or they want to review, or oddly enough, the kids that are taking some of the AP classes that I don't teach, but they come back and watch, when they go off to college, they come back and find their teacher's AP videos and rewatch them.
That's great. David has a question for Crystal. Could you describe what WSQ Chat looks like. Did you already cover that, Crystal?
I didn't talk too much about the chat. I can talk about that briefly. That's just the discussion time that I have in my class, and that's been one of my focuses for this year, is just developing different discussion activities that the students can do. So sometimes I simply have some questions that I want them to discuss. Usually because it's in math, I will maybe pose a problem that will get some discussion going. I think Katie mentioned earlier in the webinar that the videos are just kind of the basics, and so in class I might pose a problem that's more challenging than anything they saw the night before, and they're in their groups and they have to discuss it. When I can find things for this, I try to do some hands-on activities, some kinesthetic activities, some card sort activities where they're up on their feet trying to categorize different things, compare and contrast things. So it's really just kind of that, hey guys, let's jump into class and let's make sure we remember what we learned about last night. Let you engage with other people, let's get some of your questions answered, and then we'll transition into the other part of class.
Great, thank you. And Anne has a question, and Katie, let's start with you. How did you ensure that students watch the videos prior to class, and what do you do when students are not prepared?
You know, that question always comes up, and boy, at the beginning I was like, you are going to watch this video and I'm going to check on it, and if you don't watch this video, you are going to go sit in the back of the classroom and watch that video before it gets going. And then I gave up on that real fast because it was chaos, because I couldn't start a lab because that kid hadn't watched a video, so the rest of us are waiting. But I do have a little Google document. It's a little mini quiz, 5 quick questions that show me that you know what you're doing. And right now, I don't care if you watch the video. If you can actually answer those 5 questions, you can probably handle what we're going to do in class the next day. So, and in my senior class, it's such a mix between kids who've had AP Physics are in this class and kids who just barely got out of Physics are in this class. Some of them need the content to review, and others don't because they remember it. And so it's there. Watch it if you want. If you don't watch it and you ask me questions about it, I'll probably point you in that direction. If it's really, really important for what we're doing that day, I probably will set a group aside and say, you know, you really need to watch this. But I try to warn them in advance, and I only do that when it is truly important. And for on-level physics, you know, they can struggle through it, and maybe that's the best way to spend a day. You didn't do your homework, and yeah, this is hard. You don't have the example problems to look at. That's really sad. This would have been easier if you had those. And sometimes the kid will go, well, can I stop and watch it now and get it? And you're like, yeah, that would be a great idea. So you have to kind of find what fits best in your classroom with whatever style and whatever course you're teaching.
I started off the same way as Katie, in terms of I kind of would get frustrated when students wouldn't come prepared, and then I realized you just need to kind of pick your battles, and it's not worth it getting upset over it. So I hold my students accountable because they do submit a Google form, which is where they submit their WSQ, their WSQ that I talked about. So they type their summary and they put their question in there, and I have them try one math problem on their own and put the answer in the Google form. So I know before class starts not only who has watched the video and submitted this Google form, but also what questions the students have, and that's going to tailor what my WSQ chat time might be like. If I notice that there's a question that's popping up a lot, that might change what that intro discussion time is going to be. So I do have students who don't watch the video. They do grab, I have iPods and computers in my classroom, so they do grab an iPod and go off to the side and watch the video, and then they'll join their group discussion afterwards. But because of the length of the video, they basically, you know, just miss out on a very small portion of class, usually just the discussion time, so they'll have to get their questions answered individually. And I try to make that beginning part of class, you know, something that they find very valuable and beneficial, so they want to come prepared. I probably can count on one hand the number of days I've had 100% preparation, but I've just decided that it's not worth it to get upset. It's just like, okay, you didn't have time last night because you were up till 2 a.m. studying for AP US History. Go off to the side, you know, get the notes, and then we'll help you out when you're done. and just not, getting upset about it.
Good. I just want to ask you a quick question. We have about 8 questions left with 5 minutes. Are you guys okay with going over?
I have a couple minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I can stay.
Okay. So how did your administrators effectively support you, and give specific examples if you could, please?
I can take this.
Oh.
Yeah, I can
Go
start
ahead.
off with this one. One of the things that was really helpful is that when parents are upset, sometimes they don't come to you. They go straight to the administrators or counselors, and that frustrates me because I wish they would just come to me because we can usually diffuse it. But with them going to the administrators and counselors, having them on board and understanding what you're doing and supporting you, that is that's been amazing, because you don't have to worry about a parent going in and your administrator not having your back. So that's, I guess, been my specific example of my administrators have had to meet with multiple parents every year, and just knowing that they are supportive of what's going on in my classroom, and they're not going to talk down on it. They want to know what's going on, and they want whatever issue it is to be solved, but they're on my side.
Great. How
Yeah,
about you?
I think to add on to that, I mean, it's really important to have them support you with the parents. And the other thing is, if your administration's not familiar with a flipped classroom, when they come in to observe your classroom, it's going to look a lot different if you're doing this right. You're up and around. You're not lecturing. Kids, when this evolves, kids could actually be doing all different things in all different phases of the lesson, so it looks different to the administrators. And for some of them, it may look kind of messier than they're used to, and that may or may not be what they want to see. So you have to let them know that this is really great teaching going on, and explain how it is really great teaching. And then administrators need to know this is new. This is new for you, and hopefully they'll be on board with you making this leap and taking some risks. And if you're open with them, that it may not always go great, but I'm doing my best to make it great, and I'd love your input, and make it kind of a team activity, that may help too.
Great. How do you address differentiation? Do you prepare different work for the different classrooms? And Crystal, you want to start on that one?
Sure. I think kind of what I mentioned with the students submitting the Google form before class really that really sets the path for the differentiation that I'm going to be doing in class. So I obviously kind of know which students are going to struggle, and I know what they're going to struggle on just because I've taught the courses so many years. But getting that feedback from them before they come into class really kind of sets the stage. And with my older kids, there's certain students that I will definitely probe to come to a small group when I'm going over stuff, or be checking in with them more individually rather than as a whole group. But other times I, leave it open, and I'm like, all right, guys, I'm going to, do this little tutorial small group. Whoever needs some more explanation, come on over, and giving them a little bit of that responsibility for their learning. So there's definitely a lot of class time available to be able to reach different learners at different levels, and I would say the feedback I get from them from the lesson before is key in those decisions that I make.
Yeah, and since I get similar feedback with questions on the Google form also, and use that like Crystal does to decide, okay, we need to back up a little bit as a whole class, or these 5 guys need extra help. Or when I'm going around and you're interacting with these kids constantly, you know exactly when they've got it. I mean, you can tell, and you can tell them, hey, you've got this, you want to move on to the next thing, and they can move on to the next thing if it's ready for them. Or you can give them some kind of extension and say, hey, what is it you're curious about, and let them go off and find it, which is nice for science.
Great. How do you organize the process of assessment and examinations? Crystal, go ahead.
Okay. I've tried a couple different things over the last 3 years, and I'm not going to say I've found the perfect thing because I'm going to keep tweaking and trying to figure it out. I do synchronous exams in my class. My students still do take a paper pencil exam, and it is all on the same day. So they do take quizzes throughout the course of the unit to check their progress, and those are all asynchronous. They can take them any day. They can retake them as many times as they want, and there's different versions every day. But the final deadline for the unit is, on a certain day. That's when everyone's going to take the test. They can still reassess on that test or portions of that test later on, but I found that it was just a little bit too crazy for me to have asynchronous quizzes and asynchronous tests. So I have set a deadline for that.
Yeah, at our high school, it's a big high school, we have 8 physics teachers that all have sections of physics, and we all test on the same days. So, if we finish up the unit, but like Crystal, in between the beginning and end of a unit, if a kid's moving on, I make sure that the little quizzes and the little lesson checks are available for them to do as they're ready, and then we move on. In my senior elective, which is project-based learning, I got to October, I think, year before last, and went, wow, I don't have anything to put on a piece of paper to ask questions to get multiple choice answers, so I'm throwing it out. And they are provided a challenge. They have to meet the challenge. Oftentimes that challenge happens on the same day if it's a competition type thing. So they do have to be ready at a certain time somewhat, but it's flexible. We'll all get to the end at the same time, and it'll be just fine. So that class is a whole lot different than a standard curriculum-driven course.
Great, thank you. I'm concerned that the other geometry teacher at my school isn't going to flip next year, although I am working on him. I'm trying to prepare myself for parents who may try to switch their kids to the other teacher's class. Do you have any advice for me?
I've experienced that 100% because I'm the only teacher at my school flipping, and there's obviously other teachers who teach the same course that I do. And I think that's where having your administrators on board is key, because they don't allow students at my school to switch classes purely for teacher preference. They work with the student, they counsel the student, we have meetings to help the student, but they won't just let them give up and say, get me out of here. And by the middle, within a couple months or the middle of the year, those students are finding success. But at first, it's too much of a shock, it's too much of a change. So having administrators and counselors on board is really huge in helping that happen. One thing that I found that's actually pretty humorous is I will have students who I have never met in my life who are in other teachers' classes come up and thank me for the videos, because even though they're not in my class, they still watch my video lessons to help them in their learning. And the students may not see that as a benefit at the beginning of the year when they are quote-unquote forced to be in this class. But through the middle of the year, as they realize how helpful it can be, they're grateful that they got stuck with me, I guess you can say.
Yeah, and our administration treats it the same way. It's a teaching style. I'm still meeting all the curriculum standards. I still do everything that I'm supposed to do. It's just a teaching style, and you don't get to pick teachers. If there's a special reason, if it's a special ed issue, then that's different, and so they handle that on a case-by-case basis. We did have one student asked to leave the class, and they were granted that, and 2 weeks later they asked to come back, and oddly enough they weren't granted the return, and they left them in the other class to spread the word. It's a bad idea to move out. So, but now that we're all, the whole team is flipped, so that has changed the aspect of that. But it does happen that there's I want out because it's new and different, and I can't handle change.
Those are great points. Thank you. Is there a difference in the way you communicate between a parent with a freshman student and a parent with a senior student?
You'll have to take that one because all I have is juniors and seniors.
Okay. Yeah, I have all levels. I would say that the freshman students are a lot more needy, and they might need a little bit more of that like they need a little bit more of that parent support and guidance at home. So not only modeling for the students, but maybe a little bit more communication and modeling with the parents of exactly what their students should be doing. Not that the parents are there helping with the math per se, because they may not know it, but how to support them in making sure that they are actually, you know, paying attention when they're taking notes on the video and all of that. I found one of the biggest differences between the lower level students and the higher level students is just the responsibility and maturity that's going to come with age. And the upper level students take a little bit more responsibility for themselves, and they can handle it a little bit better on a general case, not 100% across the board. But the freshman students do need a little bit more hand-holding, and so getting their parents on board, I guess, with that is important.
Great. We have 3 more questions. This first one is super easy. So several people have asked, will we get copies of notes, surveys, the samples of communications that you sent home?
Yes, we can get those to you.
Hey.
Yeah, mine's, I can do the same, so no problem.
Great. So if you guys just want to email those to me, and then I'll make sure and get them out to everybody that participated today. Next question, what are some of the ways that you differentiate for your stronger students? What types of activities do you find work best for them?
Well, for my class, I've put out the challenge, since they all have nice little smartphones, and I was just recently given a box of iPods. I have them go out and demonstrate some physics and explain it. They're also, you can add, with the project-based learning class, I can also add on additional challenge. And really, if you give them a framework, oftentimes those kids that want the extra challenge will build that extra challenge in if you give them the freedom to do that and don't hem them in. That's kind of one of the interesting things that I found in my senior class, is they'll do amazing stuff all on their own. If you tell them a minimum of these 5 things, you'll get 8 things, and the next 3 are really much better than the 5 you thought of. But I do like saying, hey, you know, we're doing momentum. Go. I'd like a elastic collision. Go find me one without using your own car, and they'll come back with something interesting. And the thought process of going, how am I going to grab one of the toys in the room and make it collide, and how am I going to make an elastic collision, is really fun to watch. I mean, so I've enjoyed that probably more so than the kids.
Yeah, and this is something that I'm continually trying to work on. I wouldn't say I'm 100% happy with the different challenge activities that I have at this point, but some things that I have done is, you know, I have students create their own problems and do different things on their student blogs, and my students that are at a higher level, I will give them some higher expectations, and, you know, maybe they'll be able to do, there's 3 different levels of problems that they can choose to post about, and challenging them to pick the higher option. I've noticed sometimes that some of my top students are fine just doing the status quo, and they don't want to go deeper and go further. They're fine with meeting the requirements and then studying for their other classes. And so that has been a battle and a challenge for me, because I know that they can, you know, continue to explore and delve deeper in everything, but, you know, once they've met the basic requirements, they don't have any interest in going further. So that's a challenge for me that I want to continue to work on.
That's great. So we have one more question, and it's about challenges. So what has been your greatest challenge in flipping your classroom? And Crystal, let's start with you.
Well, there's been a lot of challenges. It's been a great journey, but there's always another bump in the road. I think one of the biggest challenges has really just been trying to figure out what I want class time to look like. Like I mentioned at the beginning, when I started flipping, the focus was more on the videos, and then I realized that there's so much more, and it can be so much deeper than that. And so over the last, I would say, I guess probably the last 2 years, so after my first year of just trying to figure it out, the last 2 years I've really tried to find different in-class activities and ways to incorporate inquiry into my math class, and ways to challenge and motivate my students despite this different environment. So I'd say that's a challenge that I've overcome in some ways, but I'm still trying to continue to make it better for my students.
Yeah, I guess mine is similar. It's all about how to use that class time, because I'm past the technology bump, and like Crystal said, there's always technology junk, and you just get to the point where you deal with it and move on. But one of the big complaints of my kids is that they can't ask questions during lecture if they're watching a video. And I've struggled with this one for 3 years, and it's going to be a continuing struggle, because I remember the questions, and they weren't all that brilliant. They were, should I be writing this down? Will you go back and repeat that? Are we supposed to be taking notes now? And will this be on the test? And none of those are just earth-shattering, but they think they've got these earth-shattering questions, and there probably was one every once in a while. And there's always that one kid that just monopolizes the lecture time and, tries to get you off on some rabbit trail. But they do miss the conversation, I guess. And so getting that piece back into it by doing the discussions and maybe having some kind of interaction, I'm still working on. And so, I've tried having them write a challenge question that we would use the next day in class to kind of tie the video lesson together with class. I've done warm-ups that do that. But it's kind of a work in progress. I tried a little bit of peer instruction this year, but since I teach an English learners class, it doesn't work well when no one speaks English. But I'll try that again. I still have great faith in the peer instruction, and I do want to try that again. So that's my work in progress, is getting those really great discussions going.
That's great. You guys have answered such wonderful questions, and thank you to all the attendees for giving us so many great questions and helping us think outside the box. This has been wonderful. So I just want to remind everyone, look for our email with the webinar recording. You'll get that soon. And in the meantime, if you have any further questions, feel free to email us at sales@schoolwires.com. And to learn more about SchoolWire solutions that support flipped learning, visit our website at schoolwires.com and then look under articles and videos, and you'll see all kinds of flipped learning information there. And so thanks again, Crystal and Katie. You've been amazing, and we sure appreciate working with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Kristen, thank you for coming and telling us all about the exciting stuff coming up with Flip Learning Network.
Thank you very much. Thanks, SchoolWires, for hosting.
Thank you. And everybody have a great rest of your day, and you can exit this webinar now by clicking on the exit button from the control panel. Take care.